Good afternoon, members, and welcome to the Caucus of the Whole on Wednesday, March 26th. We have two topics for today's Caucus of the Whole. We are going to start with a presentation on the budget from the House Appropriations Committee, and then we will receive updates from the House Education Committee and House Ways and Means Committee on the education bill. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the chair, Representative Scheid.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and hello, everybody. Not a view I get to see it very often. Kind of nice. Okay, so the FY26 budget, H493, represents the work and thinking of many people. We had a total of 284 witnesses, including 88 members of the public in 2 public hearings, and 14 legislators who came to a special hearing for legislators, plus a lot of written testimony from many sources and all of the committee letters outlining the priorities of each policy committee. The requests we received outnumbered the funds available by a factor of 7. In other words, we had 7 times more in funding requests than we had money available. As a result, we have had to make many, many difficult decisions. The bill you see before you is the result of many conversations and much compromise on the part of all of us. And as a result, we voted out the budget unanimously, 11-0-0. I'd like to thank the entire committee for their hard work and willingness to work together to get to this place. Thank you, committee members. Yay. In addition to the bill itself, we are offering a 3-page highlights document, a high-level budget overview, and a list of the 47 one-time appropriations. I'll review a few of the highlights, and then we're happy to answer questions. So on the pages table, there are copies of the documents that I've just referenced. If you want to take a look at them, there's still more copies down there if anybody's interested. And I will be sending out an email after this with links to all the documents too, so you can, and a couple more, so you can look at them later as well. So the budget this year exceeds for the first time $9 billion, but only $2.4 billion of that is what we call general fund dollars. You'll see on the highlight sheet, this is what I'm referencing. $3.15 billion is federal funds, and we don't know what's going to be happening there, so we had that in mind as we were making some of the decisions we've had to make. We just don't know what's going to happen there. The transportation is about $360 million, and education funds are $2.4 billion. Other funds are $683, and that's how we get to the $9 billion. So some of the highlights. We have 2 kinds of appropriations. We have base appropriations, which stay in the budget and generally repeat year after year. And then we have one-time, which sounds exactly what they are, which is one time for 1 year. And then those things certainly get reviewed every year. It may or may not be there because they are aligned with usually one-time grant programs or projects or something that isn't an ongoing operation. So in terms of some base highlights, we have some highlights related to housing in our base budget, and when it comes to housing, we all agree that we need more of it, and we try to look at all the kinds of housing that we need across the state. So there's a lot of different things between the base and the one-time. It's not all one kind of housing, it's a variety of housing. So we are fully funding the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board to their statutory level of $36.9 million. We're giving $2 million for manufactured home improvement and repair program, $1.6 million for the Land Access Opportunity Board, $29.7 million for the Housing Opportunity Grant Program that assists homeless individuals. So just right there, you can see there's a variety of people that are served. In the human services area, I won't go through all of these, but we are providing a 4.5% rate increase for infant and toddler care in the Child Care Financial Assistance Program, continuing our commitment to increasing the availability of child care for everybody, for families with kids of all ages. We're We are increasing some funds so that the 211 program can operate 24/7. They're really the group that helps people find housing, emergency housing, and people don't just need housing from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. We also were able to fund a 2% increase for the designated agencies and specialized service agencies and other non-home health agency providers. Healthcare is another issue. We've all heard a lot about what's happening at our hospitals and at Blue Cross Blue Shield. The cost of healthcare continues to go up. The One Care program, the Accountable Care Organization, is going away. There's a gap between that and the next program that comes in. And we have a lot of our primary care practices are in difficult straits right now. So we have $4.5 million for the federally qualified health centers, $2.8 million for home and community-based services, and even $5.7 million general fund to the Vermont Veterans Home budget, which clearly provides health care. Some of the other things, the Transportation Committee was delighted that for the first time in, I don't know, forever, we eliminated what's called the JTALK transfer, which means the Transportation Fund gets to keep that $20.2 million, and we don't get to spend it. They're happy. Yay. That was a big deal, to quote somebody from Newport. I couldn't resist, Woody. We added $650,000 to the sheriffs to restore vacancy savings so that transport deputy positions could be filled. And we added $650,000 to the state's attorneys to restore vacancy savings there because they have serious caseloads. We've established 2 new positions at the Human Rights Commission, $450,000 for community-based services for survivors of domestic and sexual violence, and $500,000 to the Vermont Emergency Management that can be used for responsive readiness from the Vermont Food Bank for food distribution when we have floods or other disasters around the state. They can be ready to serve people who are affected by that. So those are just some highlights of what's in the base budget. And then we have highlights that are in the one-time general fund appropriations. And again, we have a lot of housing. We have emergency housing for $30.5 million and shelter bed expansion. We have some additional money to the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, to the Vermont, to VHIP, and now I'm losing what VHIP means. I can't. Vermont Housing Improvement Program that's run through ACCD. The Vermont Housing and Finance Agency has a couple of programs with middle income home ownership and a rental revolving loan fund. New this year is a Vermont Bond Bank Infrastructure Sustainability Fund for $7.5 million. And you may hear more about that tomorrow, but that is a way for small communities to get funding to build infrastructure, to build houses in their downtowns. If you're a really large community and you already have sewer and water, you already are taken care of. But a lot of our small communities maybe need a common septic system or common water, and this is a way to help communities get the infrastructure they need so they can build more housing. We also have $235,000 to Dale for the home share program, and $15,000 for a residential universal design study committee. We're back to some healthcare things in one times. Again, that's a priority. Money for support and services at home, for One Care primary transition. A lot of people were interested in Empty Arms, and we put $40,000 in the Empty Arms program. We have money for recovery residences, and some money to Department of Corrections for facility conversion for treatment services. In higher ed, we are making our last $5 million payment to the Vermont State College system that we agreed to do over a period of about 5 or 6 years. I can't remember the exact number, but this is our last payment in the deal that we struck with them a number of years ago. We're starting some Freedom and Unity grants, last dollar in for students to get some tuition so they can go back to school. And we have $750,000 to UVM for the Vermont Gallium Nitride Tech Hub. And I'm referring that to yielding to the chair from Commerce, if you have any questions about that. In other areas, the governor wanted to transfer $77 million from the general fund to the education fund to buy down property tax. and we have included that in our budget. They are also, the Agency of Ed is going to be getting $4 million for education transformation and capacity building. We're expecting to get some more details before those funds are released, but the money's been set aside. We have some more money to the food bank for Vermonters Feeding Vermonters. Some money to the Treasurer's Office for the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program to help people who can't afford tax preparers get their taxes done. We have more support for communities impacted by recent flooding events. And I think I will just stop there. Kind of a broad array of things, just to give you a taste of what we're talking about. And my committee and I are here to answer questions.
Don't go far. All right. Questions for the committee? Yes, member from Burlington.
There are several $1 billion of federal funds. How confident are you that that money will arrive?
Flip a coin. A large majority of that, there's a wonderful presentation on a few of our committee websites that the Joint Fiscal Office did. We have one on our committee page. A lot of it is Medicaid. We don't know. I mean, I don't have any secret intel that you don't have. We read what we read in the papers. We know that the Agency of Agriculture has lost about $1.7 million in grants. We know that the Human Rights Commission has lost some federal funding from HUD, as some other areas outside the state government, like CVOEO, have lost HUD funding. So we don't know. We are staying aware and as up to date as we can, and we're trying to be careful about how we're spending our funds, because we don't know what's going to happen. And this could all change if something really crazy comes out of Washington. So I wish I had a crystal ball, but I don't.
Go ahead, member from Barrytown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to question the chair of the committee.
You may.
Thank you. In one of these line items, is there a place for funds for the intellectually and developmentally disabled people?
Yes, so the $2.8 million that was in the Budget Adjustment Act is also in Section C of the budget. So it may not be on the highlight sheet, but it is in the big bill itself in Section C, the $2.8 million for the third part of the pilot project.
Thank you very much.
All right, any other questions? Member from Lowell, Representative Higley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is, I still have heard that there's the $3.9 million for exempting military pensions and survivors' benefits in this budget. Can you tell me where that is?
We, in appropriations, don't make those decisions. That would come from Ways and Means. We have assumed, we have to assume because there's no bill, we have assumed that there's going to be at least 13.5 million in tax exemptions. So when we built our budget, that assumption was there.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? All right, yes, go ahead, member from Danville.
Yes.
Cabot.
Thank you. I was just wondering, the Land Access Opportunity Board, line item 35, it says removed and moved to the base. What does that mean exactly?
So that, the Land Access Opportunity Board was created a couple years ago, maybe. I'm just looking at a member who might know more of the exact timeline. It was originally put in the one-time, but it's an ongoing program. And so once things go from pilot to an ongoing program, we put that in the base. So that's in the base now.
Thank you.
Any other questions? This is not your last opportunity for questions. Please don't hesitate to reach out to any member of the Appropriations Committee or leadership of the committee. And this is going to be on the floor up for action tomorrow and Friday. Any other last comments from the committee? Yes, Representative Harrison.
Sorry, just quickly, I think most of you are aware we have a system of so-called budget buddies where each of us will be forwarding to a group of you. And if you have any questions, you can see one of us and we will try to help you with the appropriate person on our committee and get you answers for you. We want to get answers. Even if you don't like the answer, we want to get you answers as best we can. So that will probably, from most of us, be reminding you today sometime. And as was mentioned, all these documents you'll get links to as well. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so with that, that wraps up this agenda item for the Caucus of the Whole. Thank you, House Appropriations. Appreciate all your hard work. And now if I can have the House Education Committee please come up. And then after that, we'll have House Ways and Means. Want to make sure you know who's on these committees. All right, so at this time, we will hear from Representative Conlon to get an update on the education transformation bill that is in House Education, and then after that, it will be moving to referred to Ways and Means. We'll hear their update next. So with that, will members kindly take their seats, and Representative Conlon, go ahead.
Never stood up here before. It's very intimidating. Just want to say, you see on either side of me, members of the House Education Committee. So should you have questions and we happen to be out of the room for whatever moment we might be out of the room in the next few days, feel free to ask. As I talk about the work of the House Education Committee, I first want to talk about shared goals. As we look at significantly larger school districts, as we look at foundation formulas, as we talk about scale, the goal is the same. Provide Vermont's children with a top-notch educational system that is stable, predictable, and doesn't dictate the quality of education our students receive based on where they live. How are we getting there? Representative Kornheiser will speak to the finance portion of our system change, and I'm going to talk about education policy. The House Education Committee has taken extensive testimony from our Secretary of Education to our educational experts and leaders in the field, and there is broad consensus that creating scale not only controls costs, but benefits educators and students alike. In the classroom, we are proposing class size minimums that respect Vermont's tradition of smaller. It may not sound like a big step, but it is. Class size minimums can have a significant impact on staffing needs while providing a better classroom experience for kids. Time and time again, I've been told that classrooms of 15 third graders is a much better learning experience than a classroom of far fewer kids. Kids are more interactive, more engaged with each other, and more engaged with their learning. So let's scale at a classroom level. Scale at the school district level, at the school building level. Our bill speaks to the goal of larger middle and high schools, where the opportunity gap is probably most apparent. But achieving that goal requires really a strong and robust school construction program. So we are including our school construction program bill that has existed separately. We will be folding that into the bill that we're working on today. That school construction program incentivizes sort of the goals of the state when it comes to our education in the future. It remains unfunded at this moment, but we would at least like to get the enabling legislation in place. But let's also talk about scale at the district level. Vermont currently has 119 individually governed school districts in 52 supervisory unions. each with finance experts, each with special education leaders, curriculum leaders, and a superintendent at the top. There is a lot of redundancy. There is a lot of time spent managing so many school boards, and a great deal of time and energy hiring quality people for all of these positions. And that means less time on educational leadership, on spending time in classrooms observing students and teachers, and on creating schools for the 21st century. Even the very people who are going to lose their jobs at the top of these districts agree. Fewer and larger is better for taxpayers and for kids. Creating these new districts must be done right. It must be done carefully and thoughtfully by the right people. The House Education Committee is proposing in its bill that a small team of former superintendents, business managers, school board people with broad knowledge of our public school system work through the summer and fall and present the General Assembly with no more than 3 options for new, larger districts, and that these districts have a minimum of 4,000 students in each. The research supports that number as at scale and efficient. There have been a lot of calls for us, legislators, to draw these lines now in the compressed time we have. It may sound tempting, but the chance for unintended consequences that would just have to be corrected and changed in the next session is too great. We need people with the time and expertise to assure, well, for example, that every Vermont student has access to career and technical education, and that a district line doesn't inadvertently stick a mountain range in the way of that access. We need folks with an understanding of the lines that exist today, where they work well, but also where changes could bring cost savings and opportunity. For example, each day, many students attending U32 High School in East Montpelier drive right by Montpelier High School on their way to school. This work is a huge task, and we need to get this right for Vermont students. The legislature will have plenty of work, plenty, to turn these new larger districts into operating realities. There are other details to this bill that focus on statewide cohesion, assuring that our graduates meet consistent standards, assuring that our data supports our education work and that that data is consistent, accessible, and accurate statewide. And we even need to have a calendar so that our students are all on the same schedule. You know, Vermont used to have over 110,000 kids in school 30 or 40 years ago. We have about 84,000 today. Most of our schools have lost a significant number of students, and with them, the ability to offer robust services and programs at every school. It's the kids who are missing out. Our bill puts us on a path to address this opportunity gap and bend the cost curve for education in the future. As soon as we're done here, the committee is going to be back at work. We will hopefully be passing out a bill on Friday. It will then go to Ways and Means and then through the natural legislative process. I'd be happy to take any questions if that's the appropriate thing at this moment.
All right. Questions? I'll give you another minute. Yes, member. Oh, yes, go ahead. Representative Durfee.
In the southwest corner of the state had a meeting. The delegation was invited to meet with some of the school board members earlier this week, and they were, I think, a little relieved to hear that this transformation was not something that was going to be imposed immediately. They knew that. That maybe the initial timeline that was presented in the governor's proposal was also not the timeline that we were likely to be following. But could you elaborate a little bit on when might we actually see something definitive happening, on the ground? What fiscal year, and what would that something be?
Sure. So we do have certain benchmarks and times in our proposal. For example, the class size minimum proposal would be it would take effect July 1st, 2026. Now, that's not to say that immediately every school would be affected by it. There is a process here for sort of how a school would be assisted in addressing this, and it sort of runs through what we call the education quality standards process. Other aspects that sort of need to be put in place to have districts that are operational include similar graduation requirements, that would be beforehand. All of the various data systems, student information systems, financial reporting systems, all need to be sort of blended, melded, and on a consistent, similar basis across the state before we can really operationalize a school district. And today we got some testimony from the Secretary of State's office as to what it, from a government operations point of view, what it takes to do that. So really, you know, if we, in the governor's proposal, he talks about having school board elections on the every other year regular elections time in November. So that puts, you know, that makes it challenging to roll and out something and have it fully operational, new districts, new boards, all of that before probably the vote, having a school board vote in 2028. By the way, I will say that it can be very hard to hear up here. You're right, Speaker, when you ask us to keep it quiet.
Thank you, Representative Cohn. Other questions? Let's go ahead. Representative LaRoche.
Anytime we try to do something this big, there's bound to be people that are not going to like it or are going to resist change, and we'll try to slow it down. Do you have any plans for how we might overcome that?
I don't know about you, but this year when sort of talking about running or not running, it was very clear we're going to have to make hard decisions. And it's really, it's going to take the courage of all of us. There's as the governor said when he talked about this at this exact spot, there's a little something in there for everybody to dislike. It's going to require some courage on our parts and some compromise on our parts. But that's the only way it's going to get done.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yes, Representative Olson.
Yes, Representative Conlon, as you're putting together the final touches on the plan and trying to develop mechanisms to either encourage or require the closure of smaller elementary schools, I'm wondering if you'll be considering how to give communities a voice in that process with fair standards and a fair process?
I'm not sure I quite got that completely, but I think it's a question you probably asked me previously. This bill does not speak to anybody being required to close a school. But when I talk about the impact of class size minimums, it can head a very small school in that direction. In fact, it is something that is happening in the school district that I represent, one of the towns that I represent. We're working with two current state and future state. In the current state, the decision to close a school remains with a school board, and it is a local process. And it does not, our bill does not speak to how a district handles this in the larger future state. A lot of the sort of what will a future school district look like will happen once the lines are drawn, and how it operates and how it makes decisions like the one you're referring to when it might have to close a school. And a lot of that will be in part up to the school board, but a lot of it will be up to us as we develop charters for each of these districts around the state.
I know there's also been conversation in some committees about ways that we can support some of the smaller schools if they do close to somehow transition to a community center or a childcare center or something of that nature. And that's another conversation that's been happening in a different committee. Great. Any other questions? The committee is slated to vote out the bill out of committee on Friday, and then again it'll be referred to Ways and Means after. These are the members of the House Education Committee. Please, it's really important to hear your feedback, your questions, your thoughts. So if you think of something after we move on, please don't hesitate to reach out to a committee member. Last chance for questions for House Education. All right, thank you, House Education, Representative
all.
Conlon. All right, and last we have House Ways and Means Committee. If I could have the committee come up and the chair, thank you. All right, looks like we have everyone. Representative Kornheiser.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So when Representative Conlon was here, he talked about a current state and a future state. And that has become somewhat shorthand in our two committees for supporting the schools and the kids and the communities that we have right now, while we engage in deeply transformative work to support the kids and the schools and the communities of our future that we imagine and we know is possible. And so as we use that shorthand, I don't want to shortchange the reality that we have children all over our state, teachers all over our state, communities all over our state that have needs today and that are doing really hard work today, whether that is to develop difficult budgets or to sit down and teach a kid to read or to head into their school building to have a meeting that has nothing to do with schools at all. And so as we do our work, moving from what we are in shorthand calling current state to this vision that I think so many of us share about what our schools and our communities can be, we want to make sure that we don't unintentionally or intentionally make things worse for folks that are living and working and going to school in our communities today. And so when I talk about some of the numbers, and I'm referring to current state and future state, that's what I'm talking about. So the House Ways and Means Committee is going to receive this bill on Friday, Monday, and then we are going to have another week with it, and we are going to vote it out the following Friday. It will then go to the Appropriations Committee for a short time, and then it'll come to the floor. When the bill arrives with us, we are going to add a number of sections to the bill that we have been working on throughout the session and frankly, last biennium as well, and some of it the biennium before that. So our goals in doing this work in the Ways and Means Committee is to stabilize our property taxes, sustain our schools and communities, both now and into the future, and to enable, as Representative Conlon said, more equitable education opportunities for our kids throughout the state. Right now in Vermont, today, kids do not have the same opportunities from community to community. And I think sometimes that's hard for each of us to see, because either it's just like a big, ugly chart, or it's the kids and the schools that we know in our communities. But in those big, ugly charts, it's really clear. And in talking to so many of you and so many superintendents throughout the state over the last few years, it's clear that we do not have equal or equitable access to educational opportunities in our schools. From a funding perspective, just from a straight dollar per student amount, or for what those dollars can provide. And that is why we are doing so much of this work. So this property tax reform that we're interested in and that we're doing in Ways and Means is based on years of efforts in collaboration with the Department of Taxes to modernize our property tax system. And in order to address those challenges in a way that's fair and sustainable, we're planning to amend the bill with language that does the following. Update the state's grand list to establish a system of property appraisals that will update the grand list on a regional and more frequent basis. An accurate and current grand list is critical to the system we have now, right, where we have a shared education fund, but lists that are coming from so many different places. It's critical for a fair and equitable statewide education tax. The state asks a lot of our town listers, and many towns are struggling right now to find folks who are willing and able to fill this important role. And the state tax department is doing everything they can to support communities in that effort, but we really are at a crossroads there. The creation of a consistent statewide grand list might sound deeply technocratic and in the weeds and kind of boring, but it will enable fair taxation of different types of property. And that is something that we don't have today. We have very different appraisal. And that's why we use that CLA. That's really confusing. That's why some communities who reappraised recently after years of not doing it had some very angry taxpayers. And by moving to a more consistent regional system, we can mitigate a lot of those challenges. We're also talking about fair taxation of different types of property, possibly at different rates in the future, breaking up our non-homestead properties into more specific subcategories. And we're thinking of this work and calling that work property classification, so that we can be more nuanced in how we apply property taxes to different types of properties that have different uses in our state. Right now, the homestead property is intuitive, right? That's our homes and the 2 acres of land around it. But non-homestead is everything from a parking lot to a farm to a factory to a second home on Lake Champlain. The committee is also planning significant adjustments to what is now a property tax credit program by taking the proposal from the administration of moving to an income-eligible homestead exemption. This change will significantly simplify our property taxes and how we communicate them. It will lower costs for most households, and it will be more sensitive to Vermonters who are living in homes with ever-increasing property values or changing incomes. And then the foundation formula, which is, I think, probably what you expected me to come up here and talk about. We have been painstakingly reviewing and revising the assumptions and numbers that are used in the proposal that was put forward to us for a foundation formula. And in looking at that foundation formula, we've had a lot of conversations about the assumptions that are built into them, some assumptions that are left out. And it's become clear that the foundation formula that was in front of us, which is called an evidence-based foundation formula, is around an evidence-based of an ideal school state. And so we are talking about applying that evidence-based foundation formula to that future state that Representative Conlon described, when we are finished with all of the significant policy reforms that we're talking about, the significant changes in where kids are going to school, how districts are organized, where class sizes are. Perhaps we've even built some new school buildings by then, when we can really have our schools reflect the evidence and the evidence base for best practices for schools. But in the meantime, we want to move to, before we can get to that future state where our schools really are sort of meeting the evidence base, we want to move to a foundation formula sooner, because we know that a foundation formula can create those equitable opportunities. So we know that every kid in this state has just as much of at least a chance, fiscal chance, to get their needs met. And we can stabilize our property taxes and our education spending statewide. And so to start with, we're planning to begin with a foundation formula. It's based on something called a cost factor analysis, which is based on the most efficient way that you can spend the existing dollars that we have in our system. And so essentially, over the multi-year plan that the Education Committee will send to us, we will move from one foundation formula slowly towards the other, with a number of benchmarks built into it, so that we know we're making progress on the reforms happening on the ground in our schools before we change the money that's connected to it. Because if there's anything that we've learned over the last, you could say 5, 10, 30 years about education finance reform, it's that it only works if we are changing policy simultaneous to changing financing. They need to go hand in hand in order to really make the progress that we're looking for. So as we receive, if you look at the language that's in our committee now, all the implementation dates are TBD, because we're waiting for the Education Committee's work to be completed to add implementation dates to the work that we're doing, so everything can be well aligned. So those are essentially the 4 big buckets of work that we're doing. We're continuing to take testimony. We really appreciate any of your questions anytime. We came up with a similar to a budget buddy system, and everyone should have those folks in your emails that are sort of your point people on Ways and Means. But any and all of us are available to talk through any of these pieces with you. And we also have a lot of extra documents we can send you if you're curious. So thank you for being interested in this work.
Thank you. All right, questions for the committee? Representative Donahue.
Madam Speaker, it might actually be for you. Is there a status on the poll information that went out across the state that?
Oh, the survey?
Yes, thank you.
Yes. Our office has compiled them, and I just saw a draft that I need to approve to send out to members, so you should be seeing that shortly. Thank you. Yes. Go ahead. Representative White.
Madam Speaker, may I interrogate the chair of Ways and Means? I'm just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on the property tax reform that you were referring to.
Yeah, so under our existing system, we have an income yield and a property yield, and essentially you pay based on a portion of your income until you get to a mathematically determined point that changes every year where it would actually be less expensive for you to pay based on the property yield. That's our existing system. It's fairly confusing. It's hard to even explain right here at this podium. And it's also really, folks don't know how much they're going to be paying when they're making decisions on their school budgets, right? Under this sort of combination system with both the foundation formula being predictable and communicated in advance of school budgets being developed and voted on, and this change to the property tax credit, it's essentially if you are income eligible, you get a discount on your property value for your homestead, and that's how your property taxes are determined. It's done on a curve, so we're not, to try to mitigate some of the existing impacts where someone sort of is just like bumps right out of the eligibility threshold and is more sensitive to increasing property values. There's a chart of it that's probably the easiest way to understand it rather than the legislative language that we were planning on looking at this afternoon in committee, but we're going to be on the floor probably, so we'll be looking at it tomorrow morning in committee, and we can flag it for members.
All right. Other questions? Member from Cabot.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question for the chair. You mentioned possibly going to a system where the state would be more involved in the listing process. Could you offer a little more detail on that? Would that be employees of the state actually assessing the amount of tax or the value? And are you aware of other states that are doing that?
So we requested a pretty comprehensive report from the Department of Taxes last year as part of Act 68. And that report is on our committee website if you want some fun weekend reading. And what we're working with them on is moving to a system of regional assessment districts. So day to day, week by week, year by year, grand list maintenance would still be done at the municipal level by assessors and listers, depending on what status folks have in that community. But the effort of the every 6-year full scale reappraisal would happen on a regional basis, be coordinated by regional assessment districts that are staffed by Department of Taxes staff, and be done at a scale that we're able to do the kind of statistical analysis that's considered best practice nationally for understanding what variations and sort of best practices for appraisals and valuations are.
Thank you.
Did that answer your question? Other states.
Yes, other
most other states do something much more like what we're planning than what we do now. I believe we appraise on the smallest scale of any state, and many states do it entirely statewide. Many more do it at the county level.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Representative Wood.
Thank you. Thank your committee, you and your committee, for all the work that you're doing this, both committees. Just curious, there's likely to be differences of impact from town to town and school district to school district of the foundation formula, the first phase of the foundation formula. Are there any provisions for transitioning school districts into that cost level of that formula?
So we're working on that. What right now we're in planning, but that is, we still have some time to make plans, is that the foundation formula wouldn't begin until the new districts were created. And so the foundation formula would match the first year of that new district's budget creation. So there wouldn't be a one-to-one comparison between existing budgets, existing districts. But what you said about the varied impacts, we're anticipating 3 different significant activities that would change the impact on taxpayers around the state. And in order to reduce disruption in communities, we're hoping to align implementation dates of all 3 so that they can happen simultaneously, so we won't create too much churn from year to year.
Representative, sorry, I came up behind you. Representative Sibilia.
Yeah, thank you for all your work. And I just want to say I am deeply relieved to hear that we're timing those 2 things to happen at the same time. It would be really not good to be moving to a foundation formula prior to seeing any kind of governance structure, incredibly disruptive. So I want to thank you, Madam Chair, and your committee for your work on that.
Thank you. And though you didn't ask a question, I'm going to add a little bit more words because I think we all feel very, very urgent about this. And I think it's really important that we develop a transition that keeps our communities and our schools fiscally stable between now and implementation. But we do need to be very careful that we're not rushing one section and leaving another piece of this work behind. And so I'm really grateful for the body's patience as we even just get clear on all the implementation dates at the end of our bill, because those details matter more than most.
Any other questions? I think Patty is. Oh, yes, Representative McCoy.
Thank you. So I understand you talking about regional assessment districts. Are you confident that property valuation and review will be able to have enough employees to actually do this job? How many do you think they'll need, and what is the ultimate cost of these regional assessment districts? Thank you.
Thank you. We're working that out, the final costs right now. Right now, as I'm sure you're aware, there are folks from the tax department that are regional support folks, but we would be adding more folks to that staff team. The actual work of the reappraisal process would likely be done by contractors as it is now. Most towns contract for those services, but they'd be much larger contracts. When we had something of a deep reappraisal shortage 2 years ago, what we heard and what PVR heard more than certainly the Ways and Means Committee did was that many, many reappraisal firms don't want to contract on such a tiny basis, and we could get much better bang for our buck if we are reappraising in larger regions.
Member from Dorset.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. When you're talking about assessing it based on income, are you also going to look at the value of the homes being assessed?
So the property assessment work we're doing is just about sort of property values, and we're trying to make that as consistent as we can around the state. And then the homestead exemption work is essentially if you are income eligible, you would get a discount on the value of your home.
My question is, are you going to cap the value of the home?
Oh, yes, probably, and that is not exactly defined yet.
And then my next question is, are you going to look at all income, not just earned income?
Oh, I love that question. Like so much, I love that question. Probably not, no.
Well, that seems to be a big problem in Dorset.
Yes, it certainly is a big problem around the state. We've asked the tax department to look at it, and they've come back and recommended that we don't look at it. It's really hard to get a lot of clarity on income that is not earned income in many of these cases. We do have our existing system of household income, which is sort of like earned income, but sort of not, and only exists in that one place in statute and could probably use some cleaning up?
I would say it's a big sort of not. I can tell you that we have a lot of $1 million homes in Dorset that get the current use benefit. Then they file their homestead declaration, and then they get the maximum rebate living in $1 million homes, not declaring anything other than their Social Security. And we all know they have a lot more income coming from some other place. So it's not a good equitable system. And therefore, the working class, once again,
carries the burden.
So thank you.
I would love to work with you on how we can get at unearned income anytime.
Thank you.
Right. Did I see another member?
There
Any
was.
other questions? I think I saw one more.
He changed his mind.
Okay. All right, so like the previous presentations, please don't hesitate to ask questions to any of the members, to the leadership of the committee. We want to make sure that everyone has a chance to provide feedback and get their questions answered. So thank you. That concludes the caucus of the whole. And now we will switch over back to our House channel. So will members be ready to gather